My life with Julian was a valuable piece of art, flawless on the surface, its provenance certified by years of public success. Caroline Thorne, was a respected art restorer, a meticulous professional dedicated to exposing the truth beneath the varnish. Julian, my husband, was the charismatic, powerful director of the prestigious Sterling auction house. We moved in circles of immense wealth and immense ego, where authenticity was prized and yet often faked. Our marriage, at least on the surface, felt authentic. Julian was handsome, charming, and possessed a theatrical flair that made him a star in the auction world. I believed his ambition was simply the fuel for our shared, successful life. The shadow in our life was my cousin, Tessa. Tessa was a struggling interior designer, perpetually relying on Julian's connections and my emotional support. She had a fragility that I always felt obligated to protect, inviting her into our homes and into our social orbit. I had mistaken her reliance for genuine affection. The one person who saw through the gilded facade was Julian's childhood friend, Miller Vance. Miller was different. A private art consultant, he dealt only in authenticated works and possessed a moral compass that was stubbornly non-negotiable. He looked at Julian with a frequent, skeptical distance and looked at me with a quiet, observant kindness that I had always found unsettlingly gentle. He often tried to warn me, subtly, through shared glances or loaded comments about the integrity of the artist's original intent. I dismissed his skepticism as professional jealousy. I was wrong. The original intent of my life was violently exposed on a Friday evening. I had returned unexpectedly early from my restoration studio, needing a specialized chemical I had left in Julian's private study, a locked-off space Julian rarely allowed me into. I approached the study door, key in hand, and stopped dead. I heard Julian's voice, sharp and defensive, arguing furiously inside. And the voice responding was Miller's. "You have to end it, Julian. Now." Miller's voice was strained, thick with raw fury. "The auction is next month. You're jeopardizing your entire career for Tessa? She's a user, Julian. And more importantly, Caroline deserves better than a cheater." My hands, usually steady enough to repair a Renaissance canvas, began to shake violently. Tessa. Not a fling. A deep, long-term affair involving my own husband and the cousin I was trying to help. Julian's reply was a cold, venomous hiss. Deserves better? Caroline is too wrapped up in her paint fumes and her provenance reports to notice anything. She's the perfect wife, stable, successful, and utterly blind to what I need. Tessa understands leverage. You think I enjoy this? This is damage control. She's tied to the Thompson collection sale, Miller, and I need her father's influence to secure the commission. The truth was a massive, fatal crack running through the entire structure of my existence. It wasn't just a betrayal of the heart. It was a cold, calculated business transaction, orchestrated by the two people I loved and trusted most. And Miller, blessed, fiercely loyal Miller, knew and had been fighting for me. The shock was too total, too profound. I gripped the heavy brass doorknob, trying to force air into my lungs, but the muscles around my chest seized. The polished facade of my life collapsed inward, taking my body with it. I slid to the floor, my eyes wide, the ringing sound of Miller's final, desperate warning. She deserves better. The last sound I ever heard. The transition was immediate, jarring, and infused with the clinical smell of the hospital. I was alive, revived by quick paramedics. The doctors cited a massive, stress-induced cardiovascular event. I was back. Caroline Thorne, the betrayed wife, reborn with the singular, devastating clarity of her purpose, to expose the fraud and restore the truth of her life. Julian played the perfect, anguished husband. He wept at my bedside, spoke eloquently about my fragile health, and ensured the media focused on his devotion. Tessa sent a bouquet of white lilies, the scent of which now made me physically ill. My grief was minimal. The rage was absolute. My professional focus on authenticity now governed my entire existence. I had to expose the forgery that was Julian and Tessa. I needed Miller. He was the one uncorrupted thread in the entire, tangled canvas. I waited until I was home, convalescing under Julian's watchful, guilt-ridden eye. I used an encrypted, disposable phone to send Miller a single, untraceable message referencing a detail only the three of us would know. The bronze patina is fake. Meet me at the original studio. A reference to an argument they'd had years ago. Miller arrived at my old, empty restoration studio 2 hours later, his face etched with concern, guilt, and a desperate hope. I looked at him, my eyes clear and steady. The bronze patina is fake, Miller. And I know why. He stared at me, his eyes widening. He saw not the fragile, convalescing wife, but the furious, brilliant restorer who had just survived the impossible. Caroline, he whispered, his voice trembling. I am so sorry. I tried to tell him. I tried to stop him. You fought for me, Miller, I replied, walking closer to him. You were the only one. And I overheard everything. The Thompson collection. Tessa's leverage. The fact that Julian thinks I'm too blind to notice. His guilt was palpable. I should have told you myself. I was afraid of the truth hurting you. The lie killed me, Miller. I said, the words stark. The truth brought me back. I laid out the alliance, my voice devoid of emotion. Julian's vulnerability is his greed. He uses Tessa to secure influence. I know every detail of Sterling's provenance reports, every dubious acquisition Julian has ever managed, and every loophole Tessa uses to launder her design fees. I know the truth behind the varnish. I will provide you with a financial and ethical proof. You, with your sterling reputation and connections, will orchestrate the public exposure. We will ruin them both. They destroyed my life for profit. We will destroy theirs for justice. Miller didn't hesitate. His loyalty, which had failed to save my life, now committed itself to my vengeance. Done, he stated, his jaw set. We will prove the forgery, Caroline. I am your partner, and I will not allow that man to touch you again. Our alliance was cold, calculated, and intensely private. We met under the guise of consulting sessions for a major anonymous client. The plan was a reverse engineering of Julian's success. We would use my knowledge of his ethical shortcuts and Miller's meticulous expertise in provenance research to expose the fakes Julian had knowingly authenticated to gain influence. The professional strike. I knew that Julian had covered up a massive provenance issue involving a key 19th century painting, a work tied to his biggest upcoming auction. I gave Miller the exact file location and the name of the restored Julian had blackmailed into silence. Miller used his network not to leak, but to demand a formal, highly public authentication review of the painting, citing credible, anonymous concerns. Julian was forced to comply, and the truth of the forgery was about to be officially certified. The emotional bond. As we worked, the professional lines began to blur. The shared weight of the betrayal was a profound, binding force. One afternoon, in the quiet sanctuary of Miller's private office, I found a flash of my old self, a sudden, agonizing memory of Julian giving me a small, sentimental piece of art for our anniversary. The memory of his lie was too much. I broke down, unable to breathe past the sorrow. Miller didn't offer empty words. He walked over, knelt beside my chair, and simply placed his arms around me, holding me tightly but gently. His strength was not overpowering. It was a steady, immovable refuge. Let it break, Caroline, he whispered into my hair. Let the forgery crumble. I'm here. I won't leave. I'm sorry I couldn't save you before, but I swear, I will protect the truth of you now. It was the first time I had felt truly safe since the betrayal. Safe enough to feel the wreckage. In the silence of that protective embrace, the dam broke. I looked up at Miller, his face blurred by tears, seeing the genuine kindness that had always been masked by my marriage. The air shifted, thick with unacknowledged history. He didn't move. He simply looked at me, his eyes gentle, full of the respect he had always carried. And then, slowly, tentatively, he leaned in. The kiss was the opposite of Julian's performative passion. It was slow, deep, and utterly authentic, a gentle exploration, a solemn promise. It wasn't fueled by lust or strategy, but by a shared, profound understanding of moral integrity and survival. It was the first authentic piece of art created in my second life. From that moment, the alliance changed. We were still seeking revenge, but the motivation was now rooted in the protective, passionate love that had blossomed in the ruins of the past. The final act was set for Julian's biggest event of the year, the televised Sterling major auction. Our plan was ruthless. We didn't just expose Julian's professional fraud, we exposed the hypocrisy of Tessa's involvement, proving the emotional betrayal was also a financial conspiracy. I gathered the proof. Emails from Tessa using my auction house connections to inflate her clients' design budgets, and texts to Julian discussing the logistics of their affair, all cross-referenced with the financial records Julian had corrupted. Miller, using his influence with the authentication board, ensured that the review of the 19th century painting would be announced live during the auction, right before the piece went under the hammer. I stood beside Miller in the auction room balcony, watching Julian on the floor, suave, confident, completely oblivious. The auctioneer paused, announcing a crucial authentication update. A representative from the board took the podium and declared the key painting a total forgery, citing conclusive evidence of paint layered over a modern canvas. The room erupted. Julian's face went white, his reputation dissolving instantly. But we weren't finished. I stepped forward, taking a handheld microphone that Miller's team had discreetly placed for me. "The professional fraud is complete," I stated, my voice ringing with cold clarity. "But the personal fraud is still standing." Julian Hayes did not act alone. He acted in conjunction with my cousin, Tessa Thorne, who used her position of trust to facilitate the corruption. On the massive screen, intended to show the lot details, an undeniable collection of texts and financials appeared, Tessa gloating about using the affair to secure client commissions, and Julian agreeing to help her inflate invoices, all while they mocked my blind loyalty. Tessa, sitting in the VIP section, shrieked and fled the room, her reputation destroyed. Julian tried to fight, rushing toward the balcony, but security blocked him. He looked up at me and Miller, his eyes filled with a terrifying, absolute hatred. "You betrayed me, Miller," Julian screamed. "You are my friend." Miller stepped slightly forward, his arms circling my waist, pulling me securely against his side. "I tried to protect the person who deserved my loyalty, Julian," he said, his voice calm and devastating. "And that person was never you." The fallout was absolute. Julian faced professional ruin, SEC investigations, and legal charges related to art fraud. Tessa was socially and professionally annihilated. In the quiet aftermath, Lucas and I were left with a peace that was profound and healing. The cold transaction had ended, replaced by an authentic, passionate love that healed the wounds of betrayal. We sat in my old restoration studio, surrounded by the tools of my honest trade. Miller was working on cleaning the varnish from an antique frame, his movements meticulous and patient. I walked over to him and reached for the rag in his hand. "The revenge is over, Miller. The justice is served. What happens to the alliance now?" He set the rag down, turned, and pulled me gently into his arms. "The alliance was just the scaffolding, Caroline. The final structure is love. I loved you even when you were married to him, because I knew the honesty beneath the surface. I knew you deserved the truth. And I want to spend the rest of my life protecting that truth." "You are my truth, Miller," I confessed, looking up at him. "You saved my life not when you called the ambulance, but when you were willing to risk everything to prove my worth. I choose you. Every day, every brushstroke." Our new life was a tapestry woven with integrity and genuine affection. We merged our professional lives, establishing an authentication and restoration firm that became the gold standard for ethical practice. We bought a beautiful, sun-drenched home, prioritizing light, space, and honesty in its design. The happy ending wasn't a sudden, fairy tale miracle. It was a patient, careful restoration. It was built on Miller's unwavering protection and the deep, abiding authenticity of a love that was strong enough to survive death itself. I had come back for vengeance, but I stayed for the man who saw the masterpiece hidden beneath the forgery. 7 years. It was enough time for Julian Hayes to trade his auction house director title for a permanent position in legal scrutiny, and for Tessa Thorne to become a non-entity, her former network refusing to touch the scandal she helped orchestrate. It was enough time for Miller and me to build something enduring. Our company, Thorne and Vance Authentication and Restoration, had become the undeniable gold standard in the art world. We specialized in proving provenance, a business founded on the absolute moral integrity Julian had scorned. We didn't just restore damaged paintings, we restored trust in the industry. We lived in a renovated brownstone in the city, its original architectural integrity respected and restored. Every detail, from the open-plan kitchen to Miller's custom-built conservation studio, spoke of deliberate, uncompromised honesty. I stood in the center of our new gallery space, the Sanctuary of Provenance, preparing for our launch event. The room was bathed in soft, focused light, highlighting the genuine works we had helped save from the shadow of forgery. Miller entered, his eyes immediately finding mine across the room. He wasn't dressed in a suit, but in his comfortable, precise conservation clothes, a thin layer of gold leaf dusting his shoulder. His presence, however, was still the most protective element in the room. "You're going to over-polish the brass again, aren't you?" he teased, walking over, his voice deep and warm. "It needs the right finish, Miller," I replied, a smile spreading across my face. "It can't look fake." Unlike Julian's entire career. He stepped close, gently brushing the stray gold dust from my shoulder, a small, intimate gesture that spoke volumes of our partnership. "The only authentic finish in this building is you, Caroline. And the only genuine work of art is this life we built." Our love wasn't the kind that needed grand, theatrical declarations. It was built on quiet understanding and absolute loyalty. I remember, 2 years in, receiving a vicious, anonymous note threatening to expose my fake cardiac event to the press. I was shaking, terrified the past could still shatter the present. Miller didn't rage. He simply sat me down, methodically traced the IP address, and found the source, Julian's last desperate move. Miller handled it with surgical precision, ensuring the journalist understood the depth of Julian's current legal troubles. He eliminated the threat, not with anger, but with protective logic. "I will always fight for your peace, Caroline," he had told me that day. "That's the vow I make every day." The lingering pain of the betrayal had faded, replaced by gratitude for the man who had been the moral compass in the dark. I often reflected that Julian and Tessa had inadvertently provided the necessary fire that burned away my blind spots, allowing me to finally see Miller clearly. Tonight was the ultimate confirmation of our success. The gallery was packed with honest collectors and respected professionals. During the speeches, when Miller took the stage, he didn't just talk about conservation. He talked about courage. 7 years ago, Miller said, his voice resonating through the room, I watched a true artist choose integrity over comfort. I watched Caroline lose everything she thought she knew, and rather than crumble, she chose to risk her second chance to fight for the truth. She taught me that authenticity isn't about being flawless, it's about being profoundly real, even when it hurts. He turned, his eyes locking onto mine across the crowded room, his gaze unwavering. Caroline, my greatest professional achievement will always be securing the provenance of our life. Thank you for showing me that a true partnership is built on trust, honesty, and the bravery to demand better. After the speeches, as the party continued, Miller and I retreated to my private restoration studio upstairs, a small, sacred space. He leaned back against the workbench, pulling me close. They're gone, Caroline, he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. Their ghost has been exorcised from your life. I know, I sighed contentedly, resting my head against his shoulder. But I realized the revenge wasn't the point. The point was you. The point was finding someone who never had to pretend to be good. We had never formalized our marriage with a ceremony, deeming the legal contract meaningless after the transactional beginning. But a year ago, We made our own vow. We commissioned a small, beautiful sculpture, a bronze piece depicting two hands, one protecting the other, the patina perfectly authenticated. It represented the moment he reached out and saved me. We kept it in our private studio. "We have the truth, Caroline," Miller whispered, kissing my hair. "And we have each other. No external validation needed." I closed my eyes, inhaling the comforting scent of his clean clothes and honest work. The woman who had died of shock and betrayal was gone. The woman who remained was loved, protected, and finally, authentically complete. The gilded lie had crumbled, and the true masterpiece of my life, my partnership with Miller, was finally, flawlessly unveiled.